Talanoa is a word that is derived from the Samoan culture, which means having a conversation. This word can also be broken into two. Tala means story, and Noa means to tie, which brings us to Talanoa. Utopia Washington has created Talanoa as a platform to provide safe spaces for our queer and trans-Pacific Islanders to have a conversation, share their stories, and for community members to make a connection. While Talanoa is usually hosted in person, due to the pandemic, Utopia Washington has been able to utilize digital platforms to bring you Talanoa virtually. We are glad to have you here with us today. Welcome to our Talanoa.
Talofa, and welcome to family and friends to another Utopia Washington Talanoa Sesh. And tonight's topic is taking pride in mental health. Before we move forward with tonight's program, I would like to acknowledge the unceded land that we live, work, play, and pull resources from the land of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish and Makushit people, the original stewards of the land, past and present. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish and Makushit people. And welcome to our fine panelists, Youngie, Sala, Jessica, and Alejandra. We will go around. We'll give you the opportunity to introduce yourself and say a little bit about yourself and what you do, your pronouns, and what you bring to tonight's conversation. And I will go ahead and model. My name is Giovanna Lintimo. Pronouns are she, hers, and I serve Utopia Washington as one of the community care program coordinators under the program wellness program or the Fulfill program. And tonight I am coming into the tonight's conversation with an open mind. Like a sponge, I like to take up um, your wisdom with your lived experience and just you know uh, take what will benefit me in life and also be able to share with our community, right? So yeah, turn this over to Youngie.
Hello, and thank you so much. It is truly an honor to be speaking with you all and part of this panel. I've been looking forward to this ever since I heard about it. I'm so honored to be part of this and to be a voice in this conversation. I am, my pronouns are she and her, and I am one of the directors of MEND, MEND Seattle. We've actually been around a while under a different name, but we are hoping to try to actually revolutionize who and how therapy is done. And so we have a clinical training program that centers QT BIPOC clinicians in their training. And also as a small business incubator, we have launched over 150 small business minority-owned therapists into their private practices. That's something I benefited from as I was an intern at MEND, and that's how I launched my private practice. I've come to therapy in my own personal journey as somebody who experienced both big and little T's in my life, and have had to figure out how to get in touch with my own identities that resonate for me, including coming out and recognizing that I was queer and trying to exist in systems and dominant cultures that I didn't really align with and didn't feel like I belonged. And so to find my voice, to figure out who I was, has definitely been a process for me, a lifelong process. And becoming a therapist was very much something that I was passionate about, to help people figure out who they are, to be their true selves, to be able to speak their truth and live who they are, even while existing in the systems that we exist in. So very excited to be part of this conversation. Thank you so much.
I'm Jessica. I work at Peer Seattle, which is an LGBT recovery community center here on Capitol Hill. And I personally am in recovery for addiction. I'm also a former sex worker and have struggled my whole life with mental health challenges as well as addiction. Um, she, her pronouns. I'm also a transgender woman and a trans activist and trans rights advocate. And I'm bringing with me today an open heart and vulnerability and an appreciation for being able to be with you all.
Hello and talofa to everyone. My name is Ainga Sala Tawanu Afalava, short for Sala. I know that's a bit of a mouthful. I am a licensed mental health therapist. I use she, her pronouns. I am working out of my own private practice. How I came about to be a mental health therapist, I think um, I didn't always know that I was going to end up being a mental health therapist. But I think on my journey, what I did know very well of about myself were my strengths. For example, growing up in Samoa, my cousins are like, "Oh, you're always a good listener." So some of my strengths in my own experience and my story growing up, I always felt that I was very compassionate. Again, good listener. I'm a strong communicator. My friends always say that I'm trustworthy, and I'm always very hopeful. So and in understanding or in having those I guess qualities or I guess characteristics about myself, it helped me to sort of um, I guess like navigate to where I'm at right now. My undergrad degree is in social work, and I wanted something that was a little bit more uh, one-on-one. And so, in my journey of becoming a therapist, is pretty much just being able to, like I said, I didn't really know how that I was going to end up here, but I was aware of some of the things about me that helped me to sort of point those things out and help me kind of get to that direction. I'm also currently in a doctorate program to becoming a clinical psychologist. So that has been quite the journey so far for me. Woo, so much work. But anyways, what I'm bringing here today to this space is a lot of respect. Respect is really big in the Samoan culture. So I bring that into this space. I respect everyone here and their stories and what they bring to the table and the conversations here today. But not only that, for the listeners, I have so much respect for you to be able to tune in and to set this time aside to be able to hear us out or just to see what this is going to be about, right? So I have a lot of respect. I bring respect into this space, and I'm also very excited. I'm also very excited to be here tonight and to be able to serve our communities on this platform. So yes, that's me.
All right, and I am Alejandra Buitrago. I currently work as a rural program coordinator for the National Alliance on Mental Illness and our affiliate in South King County, based in Kent. My pronouns are she and hers, and originally my career began as a journalist. My undergrad is in journalism. I really anticipated that that would be my life career. And then 2020 happened, and being a health reporter during a pandemic in a small, primarily Republican community was extremely daunting and ultimately led to a mental break. And that led me to kind of taking a step away from my career as a journalist and kind of reassessing what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. That ultimately led me into a graduate program, which I will be finishing in October, getting a master's in forensic psychology. I have a very close connection and loved ones within the criminal justice system, and my goal is to basically dismantle the criminal justice system and have it work better in favor of those who are experiencing mental health conditions and or substance abuse disorders. So I'm excited to be here this evening and participate, and I would say that I am bringing hope and a lot of eagerness to learn from this community, about this community, and learn so that I can carry that with me into my future career and what I'm currently doing for NAMI. So thank you so much for letting me be here.
Thank you. Thank you for that amazing introduction. Without further ado, let's dive right into tonight's question. Okay. So, because we want to start off strong, I want to hear from each of you why it is important that we create more awareness around mental health in all communities. Why it is important that we create more awareness around mental health in all communities. And it's popcorn style. Go ahead.
Well, I guess I can start. I think that mental health is something that for so long communities were silenced or not given an opportunity to talk about, or it wasn't normalized to talk about mental health struggles. And especially for marginalized communities, it is so important for us to recognize mental health struggles because there's a lot of trauma or social um, negative social attitude towards different communities that cause the mental health struggles in our communities. And if we don't talk about it, nothing can be done about it. And I think conversations like this are so important in starting a conversation of of within all communities and within our community.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. I so appreciate this question. I think it's something that I think there are a lot of folks that have not only been not served, but they've been disserved by things that have happened in medical profession and the healthcare profession. And so I think it's really important to be able to find ways to talk about it, especially in ways that don't stigmatize or pathologize. I think that one of the things that we practice here at MEND is continually naming the systems that we exist in that have definitely informed like how we develop, whether that be our nervous system in constant state of trauma or other types of things where we are in just an ongoing state of like trying to survive. And what that looks like then for us in terms of our developing self, in terms of how we feel about ourselves. And it is just, I think, an ongoing conversation. It's actually a conversation I have pretty often with my adoptive mom, who asks me often, like, what is therapy? Like, what do you do in that space? And asks me questions about like friends of hers and stuff like that. Like, so what do you think of that? And so I appreciate being able to have conversations and dialogues about this as a way to normalize it, as you said, Jessica, as a way to make it accessible and that therapy can be for everyone.
Mhm. Yeah. I'll just add on to Jessica and Youngie about what they said, and I agree. I think it does. It reduces the stigma, and that's why it's so important to create more awareness around mental health. It really does reduce stigma, um, and I think you know we all know that stigmas a stigma about mental health has been around for hundreds of years, so even 50 years ago people were put in institutions against their will for things like a female disease or opium addictions or something, right? In the 80s or the 90s when the institutions closed down, the shame still didn't go away. And I think that as we look back and we see that, like, compared to now, I mean, the good news is there's less stigma, and it will keep going away as we learn more about mental health and how important it is to our lives, right? I think, like, um, people will be more likely to reach out and get the help that they need if they don't feel ashamed or guilty about their mental health problems. So when this stigma makes you feel ashamed, you're more likely to do things that hurt yourself, right? And that just makes the person, lose their own sense of self, sense of identity. But instead, if you accept mental health and you learn about it, because that's what um, creating awareness is about in our communities. If you accept it and you learn about it, you can give yourself the tools that you need to be able to heal and become more of who you really are. So it's okay to accept that you have problems with your mental health. When you accept this, you can decide to make positive, realistic changes for yourself. But it's really hard to do that if that stigma is there around it. So when the question is asked around why it's important, because it's important for us to keep doing things like this and Talanoa, so that we can talk more about it. And because it really does reduce the stigma around mental health in all communities. So yeah, I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And just from a statistical standpoint, we know that 1 in 5 individuals um, experiences a mental illness each year. And as those communities, the more marginalized you are, the closer together those numbers become. So ultimately, somebody who is living in the LGBTQ plus community who is also experiencing a mental illness, those are two very stigmatized things. And as an individual, you might need to decide, all right, well, am I going to focus on my mental health, or am I going to be focusing on living my truest self? And what does that look like if I have a mental illness that I'm not seeking treatment for? So being able to create an awareness through platforms like this, and also just living our lives as day-to-day mental health advocates and sharing our own stories and sharing our own traumas and talking about what works for us and breaking down those stigmas in a really, really small way by just those one-on-one conversations, it's going to create a positive snowball effect in that more people say, oh, okay, well, if Jessica can talk about her mental health, maybe I can talk about my mental health. If Alejandra is over there talking about how she lives with persistent depressive disorder, maybe it's okay for me to come forward and say, I also think I'm living with depression. What do
Mm-hmm.
I do to seek treatment for that? How did you get into recovery, and what can
Yeah.
I do to, start living in my recovery? So the
Mm-hmm.
awareness factor is very much tied to breaking down that stigma. And it's,
Mm-hmm.
I would say, very similar to the stigmas around the LGBTQ community. I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't until 1975 that
Mm-hmm.
the American Psychiatric Association was kind of shaken to its core by Dr. John Fryer, who said, "Hey, I am a psychiatrist and I am also a gay man, and there is nothing wrong with me." And that kind of began the system of normalizing it and making it okay to stand in your truth. And I would say that that is very similar to how those of us who live with a mental health condition
Mm-hmm.
consider it. It's like we also want to step out of that box and be seen and be recognized as a whole person, not as
Mm-hmm.
whatever a mental illness is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, some good responses to the questions,
Mm-hmm.
and I totally agree. The importance of why we need to continue to create more awareness around mental health in all communities. identifying there's a problem and accepting that there's a problem. I believe it's the first step into getting help. Right? Thank you,
Yeah.
ladies. It is Pride Month and a time of acceptance for our queer and trans community. While we celebrate ourselves, we also acknowledge that we are survivors from different walks of life. What are some identifying issues that you feel contributes to the growing number of mental health issues within the 2S LGBTQI plus and all other communities? What are some identifying issues that you feel contributes to the growing number of mental health issues within the 2S LGBTQIA plus and all other communities?
I would say that one of the biggest issues is not only access to care, but knowing where to start and how to start. I think one of the most common questions that I get from my friends who are like, well, you're in therapy, right? How did you find a therapist? That is a very daunting task.
Mhm.
And on top of the task of coming out, of living your truest self, of constantly being stigmatized in a community who thinks that you don't deserve the same rights as anybody else. So being able to take that time to focus on your mental health should not be hard. It should be something that is easily accessible. It should be something that, you just as you can go into a grocery store and buy milk, you should be able to go to your primary care physician and say, I need help. Okay, here are a list of providers who are within your network, who are sex positive, who support your LGBTQI plus lifestyle, who specifically work with such and such traumas. Being able to have access to those resources and not being scared to utilize them or be stigmatized for utilizing them is one of the biggest issues that I have found in my own community. And then you also have to add on that extra layer of somebody who is struggling with how they identify or what their pronouns are going to be as they're transitioning. And that, in addition to struggling with your mental health, it's very difficult to kind of decide where you're going to put your energy. So the more that we can do in providing resources that are easily accessible, I think the more we can eliminate some of those issues and hurdles within every community.
Yeah, I really appreciate what Alejandra was saying about access to care because for the trans community, there's a lack of trust in the medical system. And I think a lot of that has to do with social acceptance. Trans identities aren't as socially accepted as, in my opinion, any other identity in this world and in our community. And it starts with social acceptance because it's very difficult when it's like Alejandro was getting at, it's very difficult to even go towards the process of finding a doctor that might be trans friendly when you can't get a job and um, you can't get access to housing and shelters won't even accept you unless you detransition and go by your birth gender and you have to resort to sex work in order to even pay rent if that's something that you do happen to have. And so I think that a lot of the problems, at least that I see in the trans community, when accessing care or getting help for mental health issues is not feeling safe in those environments and not even having the wherewithal to where to start. How do I, like, I'm trying to, I think for a lot of communities, I can imagine you have so much going on your plate. It's like, I don't have time to go see a therapist, or I don't have the resources right in front of me. And so I think easy access to care is a really great thing that we should all be advocating for.
Yes, so true, both of you. I really appreciate everything you've shared so far, and just really just feeling so much like resonance and like nodding my head, like, oh my gosh, yes. I think when it comes to struggling to get basic needs, right? Housing, food, shelter, clothing, right? All of those things. I mean, those are just so fundamental to just even living, right? And then trying to think about like, okay, so who am I going to go find who's going to be somebody that I can talk to and feel safe with, or feel safe enough with, who isn't actually going to harm, right, or cause further trauma. I mean, unfortunately, when we look at sometimes, unfortunately, the lack of education or training in the medical profession, therapy included, to be able to center particular identities and to be inclusive, truly inclusive, so that you don't spend all this time trying to educate your provider about what you're going through in a way that makes you feel othered, or like, okay, let me tell you, like, I just think that all of that leads to like, why would you bother? Why would you try to take that time when resources are so limited and so stretched in time and energy, right? And I think for myself, I think when I first realized that I was different, when I was as a teenager, and all my friends were talking about, who they were attracted to, and I was like, I don't feel that. And I just remember a tremendous amount of shame that I felt, and not wanting to talk to anybody, or even if I could talk to anybody, like who would I talk to? Who would understand what I was going through? Similarly, where I would have to like explain something and feel like I was other, feeling like I was different. And, looking back to, something that I think Sala said earlier, I mean, if we look to things like the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual for Therapists, it's very recently that things like, being gay were actually not considered a disorder. Things like, when we look at the roots of some of these things and where they've come from, I mean, I think it's very, very much, to me, it feels very important for us as clinicians and as therapists and healers to figure out how to make it more accessible, to make it more inclusive. And I think really particularly something we are passionate about here at MEND is going into communities so folks don't have to come to us. So I think that is all the ways that we try to figure out how we can make it more accessible. So thank you so much for this question and conversation.
Yeah. And I would just echo on and what everyone else just said about this question. Like, it's that access to care, inadequate mental health care. Like, for example, I think the LGBTQI plus community, it's made up of a wide range of people with different and sometimes overlapping mental health problems. And other parts of who they are, like their race or their financial situation, that can also affect the quality of care that they get, or their ability to even get the care. And that's the access that they're talking about, right? So also, like, you finally get into a potential provider, but that provider is culturally insensitive to treat the population that's coming before them, so all of these different experiences can cause like anxiety in someone in revealing their sexual orientation and or even their gender identity, because they fear provider discrimination or prejudice. I think someone also mentioned rejection, right? Which for many of our LGBTQ people coming out, it's a painful process, and the rejection of of someone's identity by their family, their friends, their coworkers, their church group even, it can be really, really tough to handle. I think I was I think it was a NAMI stat that I looked at earlier that said in 2013 there was like 40% of LGBT individuals experienced rejection from a friend or family member, and that was in 2013, and then in 2019, 86% of LGBTQ students reported being harassed or assaulted in school. So these are young people, and all of that can affect their mental health. Now, a 2022, which was this year, a 2022 assessment by the Trevor Project found that only 37% of LGBTQ youth identified their homes as being LGBTQ affirming. So staggering numbers there that can all, sort of contribute to the growing number of mental health issues within the community. I would also want to add on there maybe homelessness. It's estimated that LGBTQI youth and young adults have a 120% higher risk of experiencing homelessness, which is because often, this is the rejection piece. This is when their families are not accepting them of who they are, or discrimination based on their gender identity or sexual orientation. And so then they're kicked out of their homes. So now they're homeless. So this risk is especially high among BIPOC community and LGBTQI youth. So many members of our LGBTQI community face this added challenge of finding homes and secure, shelter that will accept them. And they often, are experiencing elevated rates of harassment and abuse, even in these spaces. But that's a whole different topic. But I would also kind of add on there that homelessness would also be sort of an identifying issue, if I'm sticking to the question. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And just one more stat, because it related to what Jessica said in her response. So 8% of LGBTQ plus individuals and nearly 27% of transgender individuals report being denied healthcare outright. And that's according to the Mental Health America initiative. So I think that really speaks to the fact that it's a two-pronged problem. It's access to care, and also when you don't feel safe accessing that care, why would you bother accessing it?
Well, and going off of what Sala was saying, like, there's levels of privilege within our communities. And if you think of the LGBT community as a marginalized community, there's different subsets, and like adding race and poverty and education and all these different factors, like not to like rate someone's vulnerability, but it's true that like a Black trans woman is one of the most vulnerable individuals in our community, and is the most likely to have all of these different statistics, the most likely to have HIV, most likely to be homeless, most likely to be in poverty, be a sex worker, suicide rates, murder rates, all of the above. But I also wanted to bring light to kind of the opposite of what Sala was saying. More recent studies have shown that, especially with trans youth, when they have support from their families, all of these statistics drastically drop. And that's why it's so important for us to be talking about these issues and to be accepting and to let other people, like, I hate the like cliche of like, if you see something, say something, or like allyship is so important, but it's really true, because if there is that stigma around let alone addiction or mental health issues, but around our community in general or subsets of our community, the issues are going to persist.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah. Mhm. I'll just add on.
Go
Sorry.
ahead, Sala. Yeah.
I'll just add on, and it's and it goes to show because it's. I think that's also why when we're talking about this piece over here with the providers, right? And it goes to show how why they are pushing so much training for new therapists coming out, right? So much diversity, cultural training around everything that we're just talking about, because of this. Because it's like, okay, you have a client that's sitting in front of you and you're trying to ask them about their identity because you don't know anything about it. So, like, no, you go do your homework as a therapist, and you know, sort of not put that on your client as they're sitting in front of you, right? So I just wanted to say that because I, even going back to school now, they are pushing that even more, you know, more diversity trainings,
They
with
are, yeah.
therapists. Yes, so they are, you know, there things are happening. uh, just to kind of like also share on that light side too,
It's
Jessica.
not all bad.
Right? It's
Well,
not all bad. Like,
and
these things are
it
happening.
plays on to what Young G was talking about nobody wants to feel like they're educating their providers.
Uh-huh.
And I think for a lot of communities, especially like I hear it a lot from the trans community, it's like,
Mhm.
why am I even going to this place if I'm educating them on
Mhm.
what access to care I actually need?
Mhm. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. And sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I just wanted to say, yes, with some of what was shared, it may seem like, oh, and also there are those of us that are out here.
Yeah.
And we love to
I wanted to bring it around.
Right, right. That's good. That's good, Jessica. Yes. I think I was also gonna say, oh, great. Now I'm like losing my train of thoughts. Oh, what was I gonna say? Ah, it'll come back around. It'll come back around.
And when it does, feel free to let us
Right.
know. Let us know. Um, well, just to add on to the great responses to the question, here at Utopia, we have a Mapomaya clinic. A Mapomaya clinic where we created this clinic. It's a safe space for our focus community, our 2S LGBTQ IA plus community, and centering our BIPOC folks, right? Um, One of the greatest reasons why we created this space is to alleviate hurdles and barriers that we, and speaking on my experience as a trans or Fafafine woman, having access to um, medical, right? Access to getting legal documents legalized and all of that. Just going through the process, don't know who to turn to, don't know who where to go. So navigating through the system was not my forte. It was not so kind to me, right? But I'm so honored and grateful to be a part of a family, Utopia Washington family, that created spaces like these for girls like me, and families out there, our LGBTQ, IA plus folks, and our BIPOC folks, to come in and just go through the process without even being um, pointing at or looked at different, right? A place you can come to, feel comfortable, be yourself, and get the treatment and have access to all these legal and medical clinics that we have every now and then. And when we do, just today we had a HIV and SCIM prep clinic going on. So when we do have these clinics, we advise that you keep an eye out for those clinics and take advantage of it, right? Also, to mention another safe space is our Pure Seattle folks. It's a safe space for our 2S LGBTQ community as well. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Before we move forward, Sala, did that train of
Yes, it did. It totally did.
there you go.
I wasn't gonna come back around to it, but okay, since you asked, I was following up with what something that Jessica had said. But since I launched my private practice, everyone is that's coming, like most of my client are seeking me out because I am a woman of color, because I am a brown woman therapist. That's it. Like they're like, there's no other Samoan therapist. I think there's like two of us, two or three of us, in Washington. And the clients are coming in, they're like, they want someone that looks like them. They want someone that knows, like, that can identify with them. Right. So I wanted to add that back. I think it was something that Jessica said. It's like, yes, because these clients that are coming in, they're looking for therapists that they're looking for representation,
Mm,
in their providers. And most of our communities, like for example, I would just speak on Samoan community, we're underrepresented. And so I'm always encouraging young people, like, hey, you want to, like, major in psychology, you want to become a therapist or something, there's like only three of us here in Washington or something, like, come on. Yeah, I just wanted to share that because our the people in our communities, our individual communities, are seeking out providers that look like them. So I think that's so important. That's so important. So I just wanted to share that.
thank you for sharing that, Sala. Um,
Well, and I think that plays into so much of what we're talking about. Like,
Mhm.
representation can be so many different things, like the representation of any community or even mental health
Yeah.
is what reduces the stigma or creates people's, like, same with the trans community. Growing up, trans women I saw were in porn or being beaten up on Jerry Springer, and I thought that was the only option that I had.
mm,
And so, like you're saying, representation really does matter, and people
Yes.
love going somewhere and seeing people
Yes.
that represent them.
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
trust, right?
Yes.
Instant trust.
Representation and trust.
Mhm.
Mm,
Yeah, well, and it's a different kind of, if I may just say real quickly, I feel like from my own experience of it, it is a different kind of labor or not labor that's involved. Like, I don't have to translate the same way, like
Mm.
I don't have to change how I talk or present. Like, I know that when I'm sitting across from somebody who may hold, and sometimes it's not the case because of socialization and these types of things, but like there's
Mhm.
just so much that we just get to skip over because like you get it. Like if I start talking about
Mhm.
culturally, like when I'm talking to my mom and like I know that some of my API friends and community will just get it, right? And I think that is very much where representation matters in the sense of like I do appreciate like centering and decentering and recentering. I think that's all really, really so important work. And also, when you speak the same language in a way, if that makes any sense, like you just don't have to translate the same way. And I definitely think that that's something that's so important. And I think for us to try to encourage and rise up the next generations of healers, I mean, wow,
Mhm.
I mean, what
Mhm.
what they can do.
Mhm.
So cool. That is very much what inspires us in terms of like knowing our part in our work and our community about the next
Mhm.
generations. When I think about what is the antidote to intergenerational trauma,
Mhm.
it's intergenerational education and training and development. So
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely.
anyone? No? Thank you. That was awesome. That was really good. Just to let folks know, um, before we go into our third question of the night, after that question, we will go into a short break, right? We need a breather. But yeah, let's go into, or I need a breather. All right. We're still good, right?
We're
Okay.
You're
good.
doing great, Jovi.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Amazing facilitator. Amazing.
Okay. All right. Well, there are several different types of behavioral health issues. How does one identify which one is affecting them and what can they do to seek help? How does one identify which one is affecting them and what can they do to seek help?
I will start with this because I actually just went through this process of being re-diagnosed. So a little of my personal mental health journey. I was diagnosed with just general depression when I was 25 years old, and I was put on medication, and it worked for a little while, and then I would get off my medication because I thought, well, I'm not sad anymore, I don't need it anymore, and then a big life event would come up and I would fall back into a really, really dark depression. But generally, the medication was enough. It was sustaining me, but it wasn't really allowing me to live my life at um, a normal level of capacity. I wasn't able to have a full-time job. I didn't really have a big social network. So I went to a psychiatrist, and I was reevaluated. And from that diagnosis, um, I was put on new medication, which has ultimately led me to be much more successful and active and participatory in my day-to-day life. But all of those things kind of had to come together in that I first had to find a primary care physician. And then I had to get a referral to see a psychiatrist to get an evaluation. Um, the first psychiatrist that I saw, I did not feel like they understood where I was coming from. I don't think they understood my culture. I don't think they understood my life experiences. So I actually went to another person, and ultimately I felt comfortable with my diagnoses. But within that process, the other psych majors in the room will get this, that at some point in your career, you feel like you're capable of diagnosing yourself. You spend so much time reading the DSM-5 and doing case studies and whatever. So I was very much convinced when I went into this psych appointment that I had ADHD that had been undiagnosed my entire life. So I went in, I said that, and then at the end, it was kind of like I was given these two diagnoses of persistent depressive disorder and generalized anxiety, but not ADHD. And what I learned from my psychiatrist was that you can be experiencing symptoms and be affected by multiple different disorders. However, when it comes to seeking medical treatment, which not everybody is on board with, it's very important to work from a top-down approach. So, for example, depression and anxiety have very similar symptoms to ADHD, and that the way that my symptoms presented, depression's on top, anxiety is in the middle, and I have symptoms of ADHD, but that is not my formal diagnosis. So I can be experiencing symptoms of ADHD and not have that label of ADHD. All of that to say is that you can be affected by multiple different disorders at the same time. But I would say how you should go about identifying and seeking treatment for those symptoms should be based on whatever symptoms are most hindering you from your day-to-day life. For me, that was depression, and so that's what I tackled first. But looking at the whole picture and saying, okay, I can't focus on any tasks. Focus on getting a treatment plan for your ADHD. If it's depression, focus on your depression. And I think what you find from a medical standpoint is that if you treat one thing on top, typically some of those symptoms start to trickle down and you experience less of those symptoms over time. But really looking at it as what's hindering me from my daily life the most and tackling that one first.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll just piggyback off of off of that. It's I think we, like, for example, I see it as like, anxiety is not bad. Right? So anxiety is not bad, anxiety is good. If I am about to take a test, I feel anxious. That's okay. That's normal anxiety, right? But I think sometimes that anxiety gets to a point where it is clinically significant, to where it starts to, like what Alejandro was saying, like it hinders, it interrupts your daily life. And that's where, like, for example, so now if you start avoiding taking tests, or avoiding things a whole lot, to where it really is affecting, like, you really need to take this test, but you're not taking this test because you have severe anxiety about taking tests, and it's starting to really affect your daily life. This is the point where we say, okay, let's start talking to somebody about it, because it is getting to the point where I think, like, clinically significant, to where anxiety is not helping you in that sense. And then that's when you kind of seek out a professional to talk to about. But I think, like, maybe a more practical. Um, I think about like my Samoan community. Their first avenue of looking for help is usually, it's not really like, okay, let's go see a mental health therapist. No, it's let's go see a doctor, a medical doctor. So I think, me in looking at this in that practical way, it is, yes, go see, you go see the doctor when your toe hurts. Okay, so you notice that something is doesn't feel right with you, doesn't you don't feel good about something, you're not your usual self. Go see the doctor, because the doctor, your medical doctor, your provider, is also someone that can assess if you do need to be seen, or if you need a referral to go see a therapist. So I think with this question, if I'm, like, looking at it, like, in just a really really practical way, and I'm looking at it, like, with my community, I know very well, like, my people is going to be like, look, like, it's not like let's go see some, no, it's let's go see a medical doctor, right? So that's just how it is. It's just but it's changing. I'm speaking life to that, right, Joe? Yeah, I'm speaking life to that. So see a medical doctor, your medical provider. It's also someone that can make a referral. They can make an assessment. They can say, okay, here, take this assessment for depression, anxiety, and depending on severity or whatnot, they'll say, okay, I think you should see a therapist. And that's when they'll give you the name of a therapist, to be able to connect you with. So I guess that's in a practical sense, that's how I would address that.
Yeah, I so resonate with that, with what you both shared, in the sense of, I think culturally speaking, it can look so differently, in terms of somebody having trouble sleeping, somebody having stomach issues. A lot of things get somaticized in ways that we may not be familiar with, in terms of when we're holding stress or anxiety. I know in Korea there's a particular word called han that has a meaning associated with it around, like, suppressing some emotions, and what happens when that happens. And so, like, trying to find any avenue where somebody could try to get information is, I think, one of the things I would want to encourage, whether it be your doctor or somebody else, like, just getting in touch with what's different for you is sometimes the way I think of it. And trying to get information about what that is. And also, I think one of the things that we try to language a little bit differently is, we recognize that things like the DSM and the manuals and these diagnostics and these codes and these words, it's a way to identify, it's a way to language, so that we have a shared understanding, so that when I do talk to somebody's doctor or their prescriber or there's somebody else, we can maybe have a similar understanding of what it is we're talking about. These have been kind of like standardized, if you will, and it's not meant to say, okay, this is the condition you have and you're going to suffer for the rest of your life and this is the way it's going to be. That's not really the way we try to think of it here, again, in a non-stigmatizing and non-pathologizing way. And in particular, when you think of it in the sense of, we are individual bodies, but we exist in community and we exist in systems and we are part of these whole collective things that we are organisms within that impact us. And it's such a bi-directional thing. And I think one of the things we try to do is recognize that it is an individual experience that you're having, but it could be part of something, right? So we don't ever try to just look at one person and say, oh, okay, you're the problem and this is your problem kind of thing. And I just so appreciate that in terms of like thinking about like how to make it accessible, to know like when you've got something going on and when it might be time to talk to somebody. I feel like one of the avenues is talking to your friends, loved ones, right? Mm-hmm. Just talking mm-hmm. about it and trying to get information that way as well. I mm-hmm. think to me that can be such a big barrier in and of itself. Thinking back to what I was talking about earlier about shame, feeling like there's something wrong with me. Mm-hmm. And who can I talk to that it would be okay to say, I don't know what these thoughts are, but I'm having these thoughts and mm-hmm. they don't make sense to me.
So I guess I'm coming from the opposite side, non-clinical view of mental health care and addiction. Here at Peer Seattle, we are a peer-based organization, which means that everyone that works here has a lived experience with addiction or mental health recovery. And I think it's important to note that recovery is very individual and is very personal. And I think I talk about recovery in terms of addiction, mental health, or chronic illness. And when we're talking about the barriers in access to care, I think it's important to make light of all like organizations such as the one that I work at, where you don't necessarily, there is less barriers. There is, you can go talk to a peer counselor that has a very similar lived experience and can talk with you and support you in what you think that your recovery might need to be. And that could lead to medically assisted recovery, but it doesn't necessarily have to. And I think one of a big component of Peer Seattle and our work is bringing someone from isolation to community. And I think that in itself is a really positive mm-hmm. thing that can really improve someone's mental wellness.
Thank you.
I just want to add.
Oh, sorry. I just was having a conversation with a colleague earlier, and I was describing, I've had my own journey with my nervous system and fight, flight, or freeze, and I'm coming out of freeze. Long story, I won't get into it. but anyway, and I so appreciated that one of the things she said was, "Oh, well, the other antidote, right?" And I said, "Oh, I'm not sure. What is it?" And she said, "It's connection. It's community. That's how you can feel like, okay, I can process this. I can talk about this because I'm in community and I feel connected to somebody." That's so cool. I such an advocate of peer counseling and peer support. That's really great.
I was going to share the same sentiments, Jessica, because as you were talking, all I could think about was, wow, that's a bridge. You're like a bridge, you're a bridge between our members of our community and, the resources, and maybe they're not really ready to sort of, engage in the resources, but that bridge is there and you're able to, I just think it's so amazing. As you were talking about Peer Seattle, I think I was like, oh my goodness, that's amazing. I think that's very, very, that's a very good resource. And I just wanted to say that because all I could see is like, oh, it's like a bridge. It's like a bridge. But yeah, thank you for sharing that, Jessica.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you, ladies, for sharing. If you have anything else, we are going to go into a short break. So, you on the other side of the screen, enjoy the PSA, and we'll be back.
Sila mai mo malatau sila sila. O tama ia tama bebesima siva. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages, JJ Productions proudly brings to you Jam More Jam So. Sometimes I think about where I was from. The palm trees, seashells, hot summer suns, Pacific colors wherever they may be. Tahiti, Tokelau, Samoa, Fiji, sing to their glory, Avatar.
Welcome back. Welcome back. How was our little short break? We're good.
Good.
Ready
Yes.
to go into this? Good. Well, welcome back and welcome back, viewers. Um, this may be this may be a bit of a controversial or a sensitive topic, but there have been conversations around healthy promotions around substance use. For instance, people use psychoactive substances to promote their physical, mental, emotional, social, or spiritual well being, while substance use services often focus on how drug use detracts from health. I am interested to hear what is your stance on enabling people to increase control over their health rather than focusing on the negative stigma around substance use. Again, what is your stance on enabling people to increase control over their health rather than focusing on the negative stigma around substance use?
Yeah, so I'm gonna start us off with this one since our facility is largely substance use based. Um, but we are a harm reduction facility, which means that we're never going to diagnose any of our members, and we're never going to tell someone what their recovery should be. And so if someone comes to me and they want to reduce their level of heroin use, but they want to continue to drink alcohol, I'm not there to judge that person. I'm there to help them with their goals in their recovery. And that's really important because it does reduce stigma. And you see it in places that are reducing laws against specific drug use. It reduces the stigma and access to care is then increased. For example, my husband lived on the streets of Seattle for 6 years, and the first resource that he ever got was the Clean Needle Exchange. And having the city provide the clean needle resources, even 5 years ago and even today, some people are super against it. But having access to even just a simple service like that then led to him making connections within the sobriety community to then get other resources to eventually become clean and a productive member of our society. And so I think that, at least my personal standpoint, is any version of recovery and however you want to do that is what I want for you. And so I don't know like specifics about like the microdosing and things like that, but I know that it is popular and that it seems effective for some individuals. And I think that's amazing. Personally, myself, I know that I have to be 100% abstinent because the last time I tried to just smoke a little pot, I 3 days later was doing meth again. And so I think for anyone, because I also know people that have no problem smoking pot and they haven't touched meth in years. And so I think that recovery is very, going back to what I was saying in the previous question, recovery is so individual for every single person. And I think we're allowed to be. And I think that reducing stigmas towards drugs in general only has a positive effect on the outcomes of individuals' recovery and recovery in our society in general.
Yeah, I completely agree, Jessica. I know that from my personal experience, I went with pharmacy drugs, prescribed medication because that's what was available and prescribed to me. However, I now have friends who they don't take an antidepressant. They microdose on psilocybin mushrooms a few times a week instead of taking Zoloft or Prozac or, whatever the drug of choice is for whatever their symptoms are. And I agree with Jessica in that I think that anything that you are doing to improve your mental health, to reduce those negative symptoms that you're experiencing, is what you need to be doing for your own recovery. And I have no place to say, no, you're doing it wrong. That said, I think that the huge rise in using psychedelics and using ketamine is a really big testament to how much we've grown and how much we've opened up our minds to, these things are natural substance, like magic mushrooms grow in the wild, and there is a reason for that. And I think that, people who are religious in the idea that, they believe in a higher power, they believe that they want to feel more connected to the earth. I think that those are all ways in which you don't have to say yes to a pharmacy drug if you know that you feel good and you feel well when you're doing something else. And also, I agree with Jessica that any reduction in stigmatization for any drug that you're using is one step closer to destigmatizing the use of substances in general and destigmatizing using substances to reduce your mental health symptoms, which is also very common. I mean, people who don't have access to healthcare will oftentimes use marijuana or other substances because, it quiets the brain a little bit, or it makes them be able to focus a little bit, or they have the energy, after doing meth to be able to get through the day. I mean, those are all ways of coping. And who are we to say, no, you need to be doing it this way, when in fact they might not have access or resources to do it any other way? And I agree. I think that any step that one's making to go into recovery, whatever recovery looks like for you, is okay. And it's really just a matter of not yucking somebody's yum and not stigmatizing and not, generalizing that all drugs are bad all the time for everyone.
I'll go. So I just want to say, when I read this question, or when Jovi shared this question, I really didn't think it was controversial. Maybe that was because of how of how I viewed, I don't know if it's the issue or how I just like read the question, but I really didn't think it was controversial. And I thought that, like, I think, like, for me, in answering this question, it's more so not so much enabling, but like empowering. I think that's my stance, is empowering. And empowering looks like, here's all the information, you get to decide for yourself, what is best for you. And I think, like, even when it comes into the counseling space, even when it comes into the therapy space, it is almost unethical for a therapist to tell a client what to do, right? Like, we are there to merely be sounding boards for our clients. We are not there to say, okay, well, you did that, oh, you shouldn't have done that, you should do this, this, and this. Like, that is not our role. That's not our job as therapists. We are there to be sounding boards for them. We are there to challenge, to prod, to provide them with all the different perspectives. But essentially, they, our clients, like, we believe, or at least in my approach, I believe that, they have the answer to their problem, to their issue. It just needs a little bit of, like, okay, let's just dig a little bit, let's just, is it this one, is it this one, right? And kind of helping them sort that out and navigating that. So even when it comes to this, I wouldn't say, like, enabling is my word. I would say, like, I would kind of like empower, right? Like, and that is the same thing. Like, here's the information about this drug, here's the information about this non-drug approach, right? And which one do you think is going to be best for you? And allowing the client that power to be able to decide for themselves what they think is best for them. But here's all the information that you need to make an informed decision on that. And I see this all the time because I have clients that are very resistant to medication, even though I'm like, well, for example, like, treatment, gold standard for OCD treatment is medication and exposure, yada yada yada. It's a combination, like, that is the gold standard from the experts in the field. And I'll have clients that are just like, nope to medication. We will do exposure all the time. Like, okay, all right, let's do that, right? And then I have clients that are like, give me the medication, like, give me the meds. I'm like, all right, here you go, So it's just, I'm not there to say, oh, you really should not take that medication, because, like, no, medication, when you're talking about, like, drugs and things like that, like, I've seen it help people, right? So it does help people in that sense. And for some people, it doesn't help them. And maybe something else, would be helpful. I grew up in a culture that relied heavily on our land and in our space. You get like a sore throat, my mom is over there, like, boiling, like, lemon water, and like, here, stuffing this down my throat, here, drink this, or like boiling some mango leaves. so so it's just, whatever works for you. So I think in addressing this question, I really didn't see it as controversial. I think like as I sat there and I looked at him, it's like, if for me, it's more about empowering my clients. And that is giving them all of the information that they need on whatever the topic is, whatever it is, whatever the solutions. Hey, I'm going to go, I'm going to do the research, and this is what the research says about this, issue, and this is the treatment for it. What do you think? What's going to work for you? And to me, that's empowering. That's giving them the choice. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that when I heard this question and reflected on it, I feel like, when we think about it in the sense of what this country has done in the drug war, in the decisions about like who has the power to dictate like what drugs are legal, what drugs are illegal, like all of that stuff, right? The whole just so many things that are wrong with that. And then when we think about like what some of the indigenous practices are around substances, I mean, practices that have been around for thousands of years that are very much, as you said, Salah, like tied to the land and tied to the people. And there are so many ways to access wellness and care and to take care of yourself and to cope. And these are not things that are just necessarily talk therapy. I mean, I think myself as a therapist, when I first started out, I thought, is this it? Because talk therapy works for some people and it's great. I mean, I'm a therapist, right? So there's that. And then there's also so many ways to access healing and wellness, right? Through the body, somatic practices, embodied practices, herbs, medicinals. I mean, so many different ways to access it that I think, similar to kind of what you just said, like, who am I to say what could actually work for you, right? It's really about giving information. And I think it's still kind of, to me, sad to see that there are other countries who've made advancements in this area that have recognized that we should not be about this one approach to fighting the supposed drug war, right? I mean, Vancouver, just up the way, already has clinics set up for needle exchanges and harm reduction and ways of being able to support people through use. And they're trying it here, just not going as well, and all the bureaucracy and things that are going on with that. So anyway, just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Yanni. What was it, Jessica? Recovery is it's individual and empowering, and as you mentioned, Jessica, choice is a powerful tool. Very true. And I would like to share my experience, but that will be a later conversation. But anyone wants to add on to? We're moving along. As you know, while mental health issue is getting more and more attention these days, question is, how can we as organizations, families, and friends do better at centering positive mental health practices? How can we as organizations, families, and friends do better at centering positive mental health practices?
I'll start. I would first and foremost say educate yourselves. It is, much like all of the Black Lives Matter movement, that, it's not on us to tell you how to, be a supportive person. It's on you to educate yourselves and figure out how you can support that individual. In my own personal life, I have family members who are unsupportive of my mental health journey, and then I have a life partner who is extremely supportive of my mental health journey and does anything within his power to always be educating himself and also asking questions, how can I support you? What do you need in this moment? I might not be able to understand how you feel or what's going on in your mind or internally, but I can be there for you. I can hold your hand. I can, make sure that you are eating well, make sure that you are sleeping well, being a supportive network and being able um, to, for lack of a better word, be an ally to somebody who is living their recovery. But ultimately, I would say the more education somebody can do, which I'm currently reading, The Body Keeps the Score, and it is an incredible book. And I think it does a really good job of educating somebody who is not living with a mental health condition on what living with a mental health condition does to our physical bodies. And it does a really good job, I think, of explaining that what's up here is connected to what's in our belly. It's connected to our intestinal processes. It's connected to our organs. It's connected to how we relate and engage with the world around us. So doing everything we can to increase their education and, encourage their allyship is what I would say would be big things for me.
I think I'll focus on maybe the on the organizations and what they can do. I think like as organizations, I think it's really important to just empathize and show acceptance, to your employees, to your workers, or even if you're a worker and you're an employee, to your coworkers. Empathize with them and show acceptance, even if you don't understand what's going on, but just be able to empathize with them. Mental health individuals or individuals with mental health like feel guilty, and they sometimes, if they're at work, they'll avoid socializing, which makes whatever it is that they're going through, maybe even worse, or they could get even sick from that. But empathy, gosh, when we're talking about empathy, it really promotes sort of that compassion. It promotes that human connectedness, right? So I think like as an organization, instead of like criticizing your employees' performances or their lack of energy or their behaviors, show them that you understand, in a nice, calm, supportive way, that that you're able to. And these are just some of the ways that I think can help alleviate whatever your employees or workers are experiencing. If it's anxiety or if it's depression, I remember working with someone one time that was having constant anxiety or panic attacks that she would, call out from work, but they were so short staffed that her boss was, kind of like making her feel really bad about, oh, well, hey, we're short staffed. This is what needs to happen. Like, you got to come in. Well, why can't you be sick on this day and this day, which are your day off? Right. And, this person is like, well, it's not like I can tell anxiety, hey, hold up, come back on Tuesdays to Thursday at 9 to 5. Okay. And then no, it doesn't happen that way. Like sometimes it just something triggers it, and it just happened. Anxiety, happens, whether that's at work or just driving or just simply, they're at home doing nothing. So just being able to empathize and I think that's where this whole awareness piece comes around, right? Because I think if we know about it, then we're able to respond in that way. So I think as organizations, it's so important to just empathize with your people, empathize with your, and that fosters like such a good work environment as well. I think another thing when we're talking about on this organization scale, being able to have your company policies, or modify your policies to where it shows support to your employees, right? I think that's another practical thing that organizations can do in order to reduce your employees' stress that they're going through. I remember during the COVID, when everything was shut down, every organization was very accommodating. Oh, sure, stay home or from home. And now that everything is kind of going back to work, it's almost like, well, this now they're not being accommodating, right? It's almost like, oh, well, that doesn't work for us. Everything's is opened up. Y'all need to come back to work. We're like, no, they're transitioning. Give them some time. Show some empathy, right, and support there. So modifying your policies to be able to show support to your employees and be extremely flexible in updating your policies and things like that. I mean, if you really want to be the company or organization of the year, you can even add in some benefits, you know? I mean, come on now. You can add in some let me stop before I get in trouble. But yes, add in some benefits for your employees, your workers, and make sure that mental health is covered. Okay? Can I get a yes? Amen. Let's go.
Yes.
Okay, let me stop.
Well, piggybacking off of Sala, I think that, well, I feel lucky that I am at an organization that has really great benefits and that centers self-care. And I think when talking about an organization, especially ones that are dealing with the struggles of others, things in the social services, it's so important to focus on the self-care of your providers and allowing vulnerability in the workplace and allowing sensitivity in the workplace and checking in with coworkers and asking questions on a daily or weekly basis about everyone's mental well-being or well-being in general, and allowing employees to say no if they're asked to do something or to tell you that they're just not up for it today. Like, can I do this maybe next week, or can we start, or can you, or asking a coworker for help, like having this open dynamic of vulnerability and sensitivity is so important. And I think bridging that back to family and friends and all of that, like these are everyday tools that we can use with anyone in our life, is asking questions, checking in with people that we love, and above all, taking care of ourselves before we take care of others. Because if I know that if I'm not 100%, I can't give someone 100%. And it's, that's what I want. That's what I wrote down. I've been taking freaking notes this whole time.
Yeah, I so love everything everybody shared, and so appreciate you all for what you've talked about. And I think for me, if I may speak a little bit personally, I think one of the things in terms of my own journey of recognizing, like, when I have moments that I might call like trauma brain, or reactions or triggering, or however you might language it, being able to have people with you to just have it be okay, because it's bad enough to feel ashamed that you just had an episode of some kind, or now you've lost this much time, or now you're behind, or now, I didn't finish my degree because of this. Like, so many things that might tell you that you're not normal and that you're not okay. Like I had a family member say, like, why did it take you so long? And why didn't you do it the normal way? And me feeling like, wow, okay, that's not helpful. Like, really, I think what Sala said about empathizing and just kind of in some ways like normalizing it, like letting it be okay, like your journey is your journey, and that's okay. I think part of this also, from what I've experienced and what I've learned now about like nervous systems and co-regulation and what that's like, that, sometimes I might need to borrow your nervous system to help me regulate, when I'm having an episode, or when my neurodiverse brain is doing what it's doing. I may need some reminders that are gentle, or some things to kind of help me ground or stay and remember, like, how to come back and that kind of stuff. And that's definitely where I've borrowed on loved ones to be with me in that, and to have it be okay. And I think the other thing I would just want to acknowledge is, as we exist in a lot of systems and a lot of systems that intersect, whether it be patriarchy, capitalism, uh, whiteness, white supremacy, like we exist in systems that I think that tell us that sometimes it's not okay to be in touch with ourselves. It's not okay to take time, and it's not okay to take care of ourselves, because that requires slowing down and not being part of just the cog and the machine that keeps going and producing and doing and doing and doing. And I so appreciate any organization that says, yes, no, we really prioritize you and your wellness. Your wellness is more important than anything else, because if you cannot be well, then the people you serve will not be served well. And so that's definitely something that I think is organizationally is really helpful. And then as a leader, I think one of the things that I've learned about and I've heard from colleagues, especially student therapists, is modeling. Modeling that, yeah, having an episode, got to take care of myself, be back to you as soon as I can, kind of thing. I think that also kind of helps normalize it. But it's just something I experienced. So.
Yeah, I had a colleague point out to me that it took me 6 years to finish my undergrad in journalism, and then I worked as a journalist for 4 years. So it took me longer to get the degree than the amount of time that I was in the career field. And I was like, yeah, that's depression in a nutshell. Like, it takes me an extra long time to do something, and then I can only do it for a little bit amount of time.
Thank you. Um, Thank you, Alejandra. When you mentioned about educating yourself with what um, mental issues you have. Before I um, knew what anxiety really is, depression, um, I didn't know what it was. But when I was told what it was, I it took me some time to accept it and to actually educate myself on what anxiety and depression, right? Because and it all starts with growing up, um, having anxiety or um, telling my family I'm having an anxiety or depression. If I have none of these growing up, it would be a sign of weakness, right? So
Mm-hmm.
um, when it came to a point where I needed to understand what's really going on with me at times, I need to learn about it and get help.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way these anxiety can be um, calmed or because it can never be cured, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or depression. What do I need to do to ease myself into shaking myself out of this depression box that I've trapped myself in? I have to learn how to or what to do, right? Who to
Mm-hmm.
talk to. So
Yeah.
yeah, it took me some time, but it's very important to understand
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah, and I would say
why
it's
you
just
feel a
as
certain way.
much, a self-discovery, educating yourself. I mean, I'm constantly learning about things that somebody who is not neurodivergent doesn't experience that I do. And I'm like, that's really interesting. I just thought that that was like a little quirk. But no, there's a reason for everything that we do and all of our mechanisms. And it's very much as learning about our own conditions and accepting those.
Hmm.
There's definitely like a grieving process that comes along with um, these labels of having a mental health condition. So being able to accept that and then being able to walk with somebody who you trust in that journey, that they are also learning to support you and what that support looks like.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely, it's like an in tandem thing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Oh.
I do. I too do work for a great organization. I just want to.
Yes.
Yeah. Here
Yes.
in Utopia, Washington, like Jessica mentioned with Pure Seattle, we
Hmm.
do prioritize self care, wellness, right? Because if we're not well, we are not able to serve our
Hmm.
community,
Hmm.
right? So, yes, thank you. Just wanted to put that out there. Um, all right, moving along. Are we good?
Hmm.
Okay, checking. All right. Often, people who suffer from mental health issues never seem to think about seeking help or know where to start. What are some steps of encouragement for those that are thinking about seeking help? What are some steps of encouragement for those that are thinking about seeking help?
I'll just say something. I think like I think maybe also where you go to for help is going to also depend um on who has, the concern or the issue. Is it the adult or the child? Or and then also it also depends on like maybe the nature of the issue or the symptoms. But I think often like maybe one of the places to start, and I think mentioned this before, and I default to this because I when people are always like needing help or whatnot, they tend to think medical. They don't think mental health. They think medical when they have, a concern. So they'll go to their doctor, urgent care, emergency room. So I think that's also like if you find yourself in that place, just know that those medical professionals are also able to make referrals and things like that. But what I learned tonight, which is so amazing, with amazing Jessica, is Pure Seattle. Like the bridge is
The
just
bread.
amazing, amazing resource that like that is another resource that you're able, a community resource that's, you're able to connect with. And they can be the bridge to be able to, connect you when you're ready or to take those next necessary steps, right? So whatever, again, it's like, here's all the information. You get to decide. And sometimes maybe, that person, that individual is, they're not comfortable telling the doctor, the medical professionals, or any professional at that point, what they're going through or at that time. But after talking to amazing Jessica and everyone at Peer, at Peer Support, they're able to build that confidence, and they're able to find out more, because sometimes that fear comes up to seek services. That fear comes up because of the unknown, right? So we don't know something, so we fear it, or we just have this like we're like, okay, I'm anticipating a lot, I don't know, and now I'm having anxiety just thinking about going to an appointment. I don't even know where to start. But going into a place like Pure Seattle, you're able to get connected to your peers, to someone that's able to just talk you through, sit you down, or even at Utopia. So I think those are great organizations, to start like to get started with. But if you're going and you're just, not knowing about these organizations, and you're going to see your doctor and you're just kind of like, yeah, I think it sounds good to see a therapist, they'll connect you to a mental health provider. They'll give you a referral. More than likely they'll contact a what we call community mental health services, which are, I think one of them in my area is the Seattle YMCA. So they also have mental health therapists. I know this because I used to be a therapist for the Seattle YMCA. So amazing therapists there. And then they have, I think, also Catholic Community Services. These are just examples of like community mental health services. Like for me, I'm a provider in what, it's called like private practice, which is, the clients that come in, like they're pretty much private pay, right? When you're going to community, or I can choose to use insurance as a whole, anyways, or you can choose to go community mental health, where they accept, they're able to accept or charge at a much lower, much more affordable, and they have a lot of access, when we're talking like financial barrier and things like that. So community mental health organizations, there's so many that's around your community. Like one that's just coming up is just the Seattle YMCA. And then I think Catholic Community Services, they also have working with a lot of therapists. I don't know if Young G, if you know any community mental health services in the area. But I'd say those are some initial steps that can be taken in kind of getting into these services.
Yeah, I think that, thank you for plugging Peer Seattle. I do want to mention, like, Peer Washington is the largest peer organization in Washington State, and we have many locations. We started as a support group in the AIDS epidemic in the 80s, and recently we've expanded with the expansion of peer services and funding behind that. All of our services are free, and we have locations in Seattle, Kent, Spokane, and Olympia, as well as peer workers within different communities, including the King County Library System. We'll soon have peer workers working with the police and minor offenses as an alternative to jail time, and in treatment centers, in clinics, just doing that people first. Being able to have someone to hold your hand and support you along the way is so important. And I'm so passionate about peer work because peer work is what has helped me get clean and sober and get the mental health resources that I needed in my recovery. And I also wanted to mention that as we talk about normalizing mental health issues, I think it's so important that we also normalize asking for help. I think that there's stigma around asking for help, and so many people don't want to ask for help, or they don't know how to ask for help. And so it's okay to ask for help. It's a good thing. It's a strength to ask for help. And I really want to make that a point as well.
Yeah, I would say the biggest takeaway that I could tell anybody who is struggling is it's okay to not be okay. And when you make that decision to go into recovery or to focus on your mental health, it's okay to feel everything that you're going to be feeling, to feel scared, excited, nervous, anxious, upset, sad, disappointed, angry, because it is all of those things. But I would also say that you are loved and you are welcome, and this is, a safe space, and you will find the support that you need and deserve. It just might take a little bit of time, like it did for me. And then I would also say that what works for one person may not work for somebody else. And I think that goes to the question from our viewers of how do you identify mental therapy that does not work for you? So for me, cognitive behavioral therapy, also known as talk therapy, does not work for me. And I figured that out after 3 years with a therapist. And I constantly felt like my brain and my internal thoughts were stronger than the mental stop sign that I would put in front of me every time I had a negative thought about myself. Unfortunately, that was 3 years of my life that I was spent going to a therapist who I didn't really feel like understood me, but I was also living in an environment where I didn't have great access to care. I didn't have as many resources as we have in the Seattle area. And with that, as long as it's not creating more harm, any help is good help. We're very fortunate living in a state and in a community where there is a lot of resources and a lot of inclusivity for marginalized communities. But we also live right next door to other states like Idaho that is extremely rural and does not offer as many resources to their communities. So getting help is important, and getting that help might not be aligning with all of your needs, but it is still going to lead you in the right direction to whatever your recovery looks like for you. And what I found was, although I had a therapist that ultimately, we didn't align in the way that she was treating me and all of that, it led me to understanding, oh, there are different kinds of therapy, and there are different things that I can be doing, and there are different ways that I can learn to cope and care for my mental health. And it doesn't have to be this one way. I think the overarching theme of tonight is that care should be personalized, and it's different for every individual based on their needs and how far they want to go within their recovery. So being able to accept that and be okay with that, and also just to know, as somebody who really struggled with my mental health before I entered into a diagnosis, there is nothing wrong with you and you are okay. And I hope that you feel okay soon, and just know that you have an ally in this world. And it is very hard, but it's going to be okay.
Yeah, if I may add that I think, part of my own personal journey has been what I think you just spoke to around going from there's something wrong with me, I'm broken, people are going to figure it out, I don't know why I'm having so much trouble, why is it easier for everybody else except for me? And then having this kind of moments where I've realized oh, I don't think I'm broken. I think there are things that broke me. I think there are things that I've survived, things that I actually miraculously learned how to cope with, which when you think of this from a developmental process in terms of what happens in our bodies and our nervous systems and our brains, when we're going through, whether it be big trauma, little trauma, chronic trauma, anything like that, that very much impacts how the nervous system develops and how the brain develops. And these are all things that, thanks to things like neuroplasticity and we can rewire, we can rework, we can do things like somatic and recognizing what our nervous systems need. And it's a process. It takes time. It's not linear. Sometimes, especially with things like trauma, you think you've done it and it comes again and again and again, and you try this and you try this and you try this, and it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. Again, it means that your body or your system may need something else to help you on the next step of your journey. And I've gone through a few therapists in my lifetime and also done some somatic work, also did do a little bit with medicinals. I've also done meditation and mindfulness. I feel like I've done a plethora of things to try to figure out oh, okay, this is what whole looks for me. This is what wellness looks for me. And so definitely want to echo the idea about it being a personal journey, and also just really want to affirm that, part of, I think for me, which I think is also backed up by research, that makes healing possible is the relationship. I think something we've kind of been talking about this whole time around connection and community and feeling like you're with somebody, that you can really be yourself, somebody who witnesses and sees you and hears you for who you are, for your magnificent, beautiful, whole self. And I just want to say that if you're not working with that person, it may not be a good fit. And that may not be because of you. And it's okay to go find that person or go find that community.
Yes. Yeah. And I'll add on to that, the question from the chat of, you know, how you know therapy or mental therapy doesn't work for you. You know, your therapist will have so many tools in their toolbox, and they'll, you know, use one, and if they see that nothing is working, they'll try another one, they'll try another, but they have a lot of tools, so think of it in that way. But I would also encourage you, if you're like, you know, a potential client or thinking about going to therapy, make sure that you do the work. Therapy is work. Therapy is a lot of work. So make sure that before you say, oh, like, and I'm not saying that you are, I'm just saying, so make sure before you're saying like, no, it doesn't work. Like, it does, that one does, yeah, try that. No, you know, like, make sure that you are doing, you are following through, you are putting in the work, because it is a lot of work. I think, you know, I'll have clients come in and they'll tell me their story, and then they'll just sit back and just be like, okay, now go ahead, fix me. They'll say, okay, go ahead, fix it. And I'm like, no, boo-boo, no, it does not work that way. So, you know, do the work. Okay, so you'll have your therapist. They are, you know, very knowledgeable in what they do, and they have a lot of tools in their toolbox. So if you're noticing like, oh, they're doing one thing, and it, because they're trying to see if you will be able, if this is going to help you. If you try mindfulness and that doesn't help you, like, I can't get my brain to like just no, okay, let's do something else. You know, let's do something else. But make sure that, and also normalize, like, it's very common, very, very common to be able to, you know, if you feel like this therapist is not a good fit, end the session, terminate the session, find another therapist. That is also common. Okay, like I provide a 30-minute consultation session for initial clients, and I say, hey, this initial consultation is for you and me to get to know each other. And if you feel like, okay, you know what, Sala just talks way too much, she's not a good fit for me, I need to find another person. I am not, my feelings will not be hurt. Okay. I want you to find, you know, the therapist that's going to work for you. Okay. So, but even if, and there's no commitment to that. Right. And that's what that 30-minute is for. Like, we're just going to talk. We're just going to put you at ease. We're both going to be at ease. We're going to get to know each other a little bit, and let's see how I can be of help. Let's see if you and I, you know, have a connection, because that therapeutic relationship between a client and a therapist is very, very important. Very important, because you're going to be disclosing to that therapist, you know, really, really pertinent, important, sensitive, personal, very, very personal things. So, and that therapist has the power to be able to you know, speak into your life about things, right? So it is so important that you find the right person, whether that is a therapist, whether that is your community, to be able to say, okay, here's this I feel connected to them, and I feel safe, right? And that's also important. Like, a therapist is going to make you feel safe, right? So, and if you don't feel any of those things, right, and as you're looking for a therapist, then on to the next one. Continue your search. Just wanted to share that.
Yeah, can I say one more thing? Is it like a potential red flag? I just feel like I'm so shocked that this is still a thing, and so I just want to, as a therapist, I feel like it's part of my ethical duty to say, like, if you see somebody saying that they do conversion therapy, that for me might be like a huge red flag. So I just want to say that. Please do just Google that before you, like, that. I still cannot believe that is still a thing. I cannot believe therapists are out there still doing that. So just want to say that. And the other one I think I would want to say is, if you're working with somebody who thinks they know you better than you do, that might be my other
red flag.
Yeah.
No, and it goes off. It's like the opposite of what Sala was saying earlier about, like, if someone's telling you what to do, or trying to force you into something, those
Yeah.
are like red flags.
Absolutely.
And a lot of the red flags in relationships are the same as with mental health
Okay.
recovery and like
Yes.
providers, picking providers. Like, you should feel comfortable and safe. And yeah.
So
Thank
good.
you. Youngie, any last thoughts on?
No, other than it's a journey and it's a process, and it takes time sometimes to find a good fit. So trust your gut, trust your intuition, trust your sensing. You know when it is a good fit. There will be a resonance that you will feel, and hopefully that you will feel safe enough.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, that's it with our questions tonight, but we have some questions from the audience. Um, First question is, they, well, I will, Jessica already answered also, but I'm just going to read it out. What are some red flags for mental health services, if there are any? If you want to add on to that question. And then the second question is, I'm sorry. The first question is, what are some red flags for mental health services, if there are any?
I think we also saw that in
Yes,
our
you did.
private chat,
I'm
so
sorry.
that's why we answered it up early already.
Okay. As an organization or provider, are there sources that members can refer to that they can recognize these mental and or depression issues early on? Would be nice to be familiar with these issues earlier on than later.
Um, I would say NAMI does a really good job of offering educational presentations on what mental health conditions are, as well as signs of suicide, although caveat, like sometimes there are no signs to somebody who is experiencing suicidal ideations. But they do a good job at educating the public on um, more nuanced education. So there is a really great program that we try and offer quarterly called LEAP, which is Listen, Empathize, Partner, Empower. And it basically educates an individual on somebody who has anosognosia, which is basically a condition where you don't know that you have a mental health condition. Um, and it's very prevalent because somebody who, for example, might have schizophrenia or bipolar 1 or bipolar 2, they may not be cognizant of their symptoms and how they're presenting. So being able to educate yourself on how to best engage with somebody like that. This program also offers a lot of resources on better educating yourself in terms of living with a loved one, or being in a community with a loved one who has a mental health condition, and just things that you can do to support them. And then finally, I would say there's so much good literature out there, especially nowadays. I mean, you can go into Elliott Bay Bookstore and spend all day there looking at resources to support your loved ones and in their mental health journey. I already mentioned The Body Keeps the Score. It's a great book that I'm reading right now. There's another one I'm looking for it on my bookshelf. That is The Noonday Demon. I also highly recommend that. The author does a really good job of defining what depression looks like in somebody, and that would be my response.
I'm just going to shout out, Utopia, NAMI, and Peer Seattle. All of these organizations that are on here, because these are the resources that are doing the work in the community to be able to get the information out there. So when, like for example, Utopia is hosting Talanoa, and inviting mental health providers to come out here, and we're talking, we're sharing this information. Like, this is the resources, right? So continue to stay plugged into these organizations. Continue to, follow up, subscribe to their newsletter, whatever it is, the email, and just be able to get the information, stay up to date with the information that they're pushing out. Regarding, I know it's not only just the focus is not only just on mental health, like they have other things that they're focused on, but just continuing to stay informed in that way. So yeah.
If I may, I might also give a mention to the King County Crisis Connections, I believe is what they're called now. They have a 211 resource line that's free. They also have a call line. I think they also do like a chat line as well. I don't know if they have a text service, but they have a pretty huge resource house for resources, both community mental health agencies, private practices, group practices, all kinds of resources. I used to volunteer there, so I might be a little biased there. Just want to disclaim that, or disclose that, excuse me. I think the other thing I would want to mention as a potential resource is Resmaa Menakem's work. He has done a lot of work to try to understand the work of somatic practice in a more embodied way for Black and brown bodies. And so his work that I'm familiar with is called My Grandmother's Hands. And he also has a free training on his website on racial trauma that I think is also really just wonderful as a resource for folks to get in touch with and to do it. He also, for folks who may be more inclined to audio or video kind of stuff, if you even YouTube Resmaa Menakem, you'll find a lot of his work on cultural somatics and cultural abolitionist care. So.
I guess the only thing that I would add is a lot of like early signs of mental health illness is like long-lasting periods of sadness, of confusion, of lack of focus, extreme fears, extreme guilt, mood changes, like extreme mood changes, withdrawal and isolation, changes in energy, or changes in energy levels, changes in sleep patterns, things like that.
Thank you, ladies.
And I think young is it Young G? Young G, Young. Sorry. The warm line is the one that you were, and you can text.
Okay, we're close to the end, ladies. But before we say our goodbyes, are there any last words that you want to offer as departing wisdom to our viewers that might be watching right now?
I just want to thank Utopia for offering up this platform, and I really hope to be invited again in the future because I think that it's very empowering, and it definitely helps to fill my own cup in sharing my stories and my own mental health journey. So I appreciate Utopia for that.
Thank you, Alejandra.
Jessica, you're muted.
I think someone said that. I just want to reiterate the theme and title of this Talanoa is taking pride in our mental health. And I think that that in itself is really important. Just as we have pride in the different communities that we are a part of, we need to have pride in in the acceptance of our disabilities like there's so many stigma around so many things. I'm like, should I even say disability? Because there's stigma around the word disability. But in Washington State, mental health issues and SUD issues, substance use issues, are disabilities. And so just like opening your mind to awareness is so important. And going off of Alejandra, thank you, Utopia, for sharing this with us, sharing your space and your time and your community. And I want to thank all the other panelists too, because this was a very great conversation to be had, and hopefully it was great to listen to.
Yes, thank you so much. What an incredible honor to be here with you all. Such a delight and a pleasure to get to meet with you all and have this conversation. It's so needed to be able to talk about mental health. I will say, like, I feel like if anything, I just would want to applaud every single human being out there for being a survivor. And it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to not be alone in your suffering and your pain and your struggle.
Mhm. Thank you so much, ladies. On behalf of Utopia, Utopia Washington. I want to thank you for accepting the invitation to partake in tonight's Talanoa and in the conversation with about taking pride in mental health. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your expertise, and also your experiences in life. And I hope that tonight's conversation reaches the audience, the broader audience, and take a chance on accepting and seeking help, right? And it's okay not to be okay, right? Again, thank you very much, ladies. And my name is Giovanna Lentino, and we're out.